Anything you remember that happened in the world that shook Array? I mean, that everybody you can remember, you know, like we had, our generations kind of had 911, you know. What do you remember? You know, if you were going to think back and you want to say, I want to tell one thing to future generations that shook the world. What shook the world according to your life here in Array?
I don't remember anything that.
Depression? That would be a good one.
You know,
World War II.
World War II? That'd be a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Korea.
Yeah.
Korea?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Did anybody remember seeing or hearing about the explosion of the nuclear explosion in 1947? What do you remember about that?
My dad coming home from, he used to work nights, he did write it. He came home in the morning and told my mom and all of us that the sun had come out twice that day.
Really?
Yeah, because it brightened up everything.
And he was a ditch rider from
From Percha,
From purchasing to
Garfield, I guess.
Garfield.
so he could see that far
Yeah,
south then.
yes.
Did anybody feel anything? I mean, were any of you living in Albuquerque or Socorro at that time where you actually felt the vibrations or?
I remember hearing about it. I probably wasn't here when it happened.
Did it come on the radio? Or did it just for a long?
I don't,
There you go.
nobody knew what it was.
Really?
There was an explosion of some kind of dynamite or something on a train or something out in Florida.
Gas tanks, or I don't know what they
Even
said.
some windows broke in Silver City. I think it was rock formation or something, rattled the windows.
Wow.
And that's what your dad, but your dad didn't know
What it was.
but he had just saw that. And then when did you find out that in fact what had happened?
I don't know.
Tell it,
I
it was
don't-
a secret. Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting. Can you imagine? Can't imagine. Go ahead.
Back when we moved up here, why, my dad would go over in Apache Canyon and dry pan for gold. And if he got 50 cents worth in the day, he done real good. You know, that's good wages then. And he done that for a while, and then he decided there's more money in making those dry washer and selling to the miners that's working over there than there was in mining himself. So he started making dry washers for the guys to use over there. And,
Wow. Isn't that something?
yeah, but I was a corn cooker when I was growing up. I get a 5-gallon bucket and get corn in it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I went up to Johnny Gordon's field up there, you know, he had an artesian well. And we got this bucket full of corn, and there was a dozen or more of us kids, you know. And got the fire going, and the corn was cooking, and everybody took off running and jumped in the ditch. And why did they do that? And I looked around, and Johnny said, "Hello, Jim. What are you doing?" I said, "I'm cooking some corn." And so he said, "Well, how's it doing?" I said, "I was just fixing to sharpen a stick and try it, you know." So he got him a stick and tried it, and hey, it's ready to eat. "Hey, you kids, get back over here." He said, "If I'm furnishing the corn, I don't want it to go to waste."
That's a good story. Good story. Well, let's go back to you for a little bit more. You want to introduce yourself?
I'm Emma Bencomo Vega, born in Arrey, raised in Arrey.
Still living in Array?
No.
No?
I moved to TRC, Hatch, TRC, Deming, and then Silver City, and I'm still in Silver City for a long time. And my Mrs. Grijalva was my teacher. And we didn't know English when we started, so she had the job of teaching us English. And Gloria Welch used to call me Teacher's Pet. Because she didn't know my teacher was my aunt. And she kind of favored me. Anyway, I didn't graduate from high school. I didn't go past the 8th grade. But later on in life, I started driving a school bus in Silver, and I put in 31 years. And that's about it. I'm home now. I don't work. Kids are grown, and that's it.
And you're close to your brother.
We keep in touch by phone.
Uh-huh.
At least Celia and I do. He has his secretary, so he never answers the phone. She does.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All
Sir?
right.
My name's Calvin Clements, and I first came here in 1929. We lived, Dusty Lane wasn't out here then. The road went up the base of the hills, across the arroyo. We lived in an old town. There was an old hotel, an old store building, and an old saloon. And Clemens' old white ranch house, we'd go by it to get to our place, go to a mesquite thicket. We lived in the old hotel. A family named Lacey lived in the old store building. And that old saloon was where the corrals were. There were bullet holes in the walls. And we kids, we played in that old mill. It was an old flour mill, I guess, grist mill or something.
They called it the mill site,
Yeah,
the town there.
And,
Mill settlement.
the only thing that's left there, the old foundation is still there, to that old building. But the rest of it was lovely and gone. We lived there and moved, what then, 29 and 31, I guess, we moved up where Black's Dairy. We farmed that place. And we, you know, back in those years, the sharecrop, and I guess it was all under the Elkview Dam reclamation. I don't really know, but most of the land you rented to sharecrop, and the water came with the land. You know, you didn't have to pay for the water. But in 1934, I guess, they started charging for irrigation water. Well, we didn't have any money, so we left here in a covered wagon, going to Colorado. And then I had a hiatus between grade school and high school, and lied about my age and joined the CCC camps.
Where were you stationed?
We was at Mesa Verde National Park in Colorado.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, I got out of CC camps and I wanted to go to high school, but there where we lived in Colorado, there was just a 2-year country high school. And I went there, and I wanted to finish high school, so I had a sister, married sister living here. She married Pug Wells. And I came down here and I didn't ask them, I just came, and they put up with me, and I went to 2 years high school in Hot Springs and graduated in Hot Springs in 1940. And I guess like my parents moved over here, and the little old house they lived in is gone. And they moved it over. Buck Welch farmed right off over here. I drove around here yesterday, all day, just looking. And the house where they lived is gone. And the old mill is gone, of course, and the foundation is still there. And I drove up yesterday to Black's Dairy. Of course, I can't identify the house we lived in. It may not be there.
Let me ask you something about the old mill you keep talking about.
Yeah.
That was the place that my dad owned there, and they tore those buildings down.
Yeah.
After we bought the place from
Yeah.
his.
Okay,
He sold it to
I
Ashley's
knew he
and then we
farmed
bought
it.
it from Ashley's, yeah.
okay.
And that was still there then.
Yeah.
But I didn't know there was any foundation or anything left there,
Yeah, no cement foundations
because
down.
everything else is, they put it in
If you
farmland.
drive down Dusty Lane, across the road, there's some, I guess something to do, some tanks there.
Yeah,
They moved that old house my folks lived in, they moved it right there where those tanks are, and my mother lived there.
yeah,
For
I remember
years.
Miss Clemens was,
But that old house is gone,
yeah.
Welch's old place is gone. And I can only identify the foundation of that old mill.
Yeah.
And if you drive across the road, there's a road kind of curves a little bit, but there's one goes straight on.
But
If
it
you
didn't
go
used to
straight
go
on-
straight on, it goes straight on now.
You can walk up there and see the foundation of that old place.
Did you have running water?
Running water? No.
How'd you get your water in the house?
I guess, did anybody have running water?
No, nobody had running water, no indoor bathrooms.
No electricity.
Have that back, no electricity.
And my great-grandparents would talk about, that you had to go out and they had a water wheel and the water would be pumped up through the town of Hot Springs. And then, but you went down and took a hot mineral bath, but you couldn't use a bar of soap. I mean, so, but they had a bathhouse, they had the Star bathhouse, and of course, my mother would say that, that they would, there was two different places you could bathe. You could take the mineral bath, or you could, but the outhouse was in the back. And of course, there were some real challenges in Hot Springs because of the water table. So there were certain things that had to be adjusted that I think sometimes we don't think about. The biggest thing was that here in the valley, building adobe was a very common type of a building type. But in Hot Springs, that didn't work, so they ended up building with a type of cement.
The adobes, when we after we got up here, we hired Daddy hired some people to build adobes for a penny apiece.
Oh, really?
I got another story though.
Penny
Before they-
apiece.
When they worked on the Caval Dam, and they cut the salt cedar into posts and stacked them in piles. Well, they were going to sell them, I guess, but then they didn't sell, so they started burning them. They had a watchman watching them so nobody could get any of them, and they was burning them. And me and Dean, we went up there, that's my brother, older than me, and this watchman, we was talking to him, and there's some guys up about a mile up there that's stealing your posts. So, well, he said, I'll go and run them off. So he took off up there, and we filled the trailer full of posts and brought it home. And unloaded and went back up there. He said, I know there's somebody stealing posts, and I'm going to be back in about an hour, and you better not be here either. But that's just a story that happened a long time ago before they put the water in the dam. I went to school one time with Leroy Wormington. The Cavallo Schoolhouse was down on the river there, where the water's at now. And then we played hooky.
I bet.
And the truant officer got us and gave us a bad time.
School wasn't a popular place. Do we need to now switch phones?
Yeah, and your story.
Okay, I'm Anita
Maiden name. Go ahead, start over.
Okay, I'm Anita Higginbotham. My mother and dad were Lloyd and Liddy Welch.
They went out the other day, they said,
Start over. Yeah, start over. We'll cut that part out. Quiet! Okay, go ahead.
They're quiet? Okay.
Director says cut.
Anita Welch.
No. I'm Anita Higginbotham. My mother and dad were Lloyd and Liddy Welch. And I was born in 1941, just across the Arroyo. I was born at home. My sister Gloria remembers when I was born. Everybody that lived down the lane practically was related to us, except the Tibbses, and we considered them family. And I went to school at Arrey, and we only went through the 8th grade, and then I remember that we graduated from the 8th grade. It was a big deal. We had a ceremony just like high school graduation has now. We went to Carlsbad Caverns on a little trip. The whole class went. Mom and Dad took one car, and I don't remember who else. And then I went, excuse me, I went on to TRC to high school, and I graduated in 1958 through the Hot Springs High School in TRC. In 1959, I married Charlie Higginbotham, and he was a terrible hatch bear. You know how the bears and the tigers were. And we lived in Las Cruces for 5 or 6 years, and then we moved back to Salem. We've been there ever since. And my husband and I both are retired from White Sands, and we have one son that lives in Tucson and 2 grandchildren. A granddaughter at U of A, and our grandson's graduating from high school this year.
What would you like to tell them about your childhood? Because they're going to look at this and they're going to say, that's our grandmother. Tell them something that you want them to remember about your family that's so important.
What I remember most about my family is what happy times it was. The families, if they did any fussing and fighting, my grandma Welch, she straightened those boys right out, you know. And I remember that we used to all play together, fight together, and whatever. And on Sundays we would all go to Grandma and Grandpa's, and they lived right over here. And my grandma would play dominoes with her sons.
What were their names?
Who?
Your grandma and grandpa. What were their full names?
Well, they called my grandpa Boss. Everybody called him Boss. All the kids called him Boss. And my grandmother was Anna Lara. And a lot of the time, my grandma Terrell, who had lost her eyesight, lived with them. And I remember she was always afraid something was going to happen to one of us because she couldn't see. And so she always wanted all of us kids to just sit in the house, and you know, where she knew we were at. So this is terrible, I shouldn't even tell this, but we'd start sneaking out one at a time, and whoever got caught had to be it, and then we'd play kick the can and that sort of thing. And I had a couple of uncles that never did quite grow up. My Uncle Gene and TK and them. And they play kick the can was, when they kicked that can, you never did find that can anymore. But we did that every Sunday. We'd go over there and we'd eat, and the kids would all run and play. It was a wonderful childhood growing up. It was a lot simpler time. Family meant a lot. That doesn't mean now, you know, everybody's scattered because there's not really the work for the kids here and stuff to stay here. So consequently, the families aren't as close anymore. It was kind of coincidence because the old mill where they were talking about was like on my dad's place, Mom and Dad's place. And after I married Charlie, we've come to find out his parents had lived there at one time. They had settled at Arrey for a while, and that's where they lived and had moved on. And, you know, everybody in the valley practically is kin to each other, I guess. Jim was talking about his brother Dee. My sister-in-law Camilla was married to his brother Dee. And I remember that, you know, we worked hard because we had to hoe cotton and stuff when we were growing up and stuff. And I didn't mind hoeing, but I hated to pick cotton because those burrs make your hands all, you know, bleed and everything else. And I could hardly wait to go to high school because my sister was older and she went to high school and she got home too late to pick cotton. And so I was picking cotton after school, and I remember we went to school at Arrey and we started really early in the morning to so we could get out earlier in the day so we could pick cotton. And I also had Mrs. Grahava for a teacher, and I think everybody here did. Mr. Candelaria drove the school bus to Arrey, and then Mr. Carpenter when we were in TRC. And I must say that Mrs. Grahava, a lot of the kids didn't speak English like Emma said, but she thought it was very important, and they learned English right away. And I think they're better off for it because I'm one of these that I think they're doing the kids a disservice now by not making them learn English, because this, you know. And my sister has a much better memory than me, and she's a lot windier, so that's why I wanted to go first. So she could tell you all the, she says, I can't remember anything. I said, I don't remember those people. She said, I know. The stork dropped you when you were 21 here. But she remembers, since I was born in 41, I don't remember a lot of the people that she remembers. And I'll let her tell you all about the stories of when my dad worked on the dam and when he milked the cows and stuff, because she has a lot better memory of it because she was older than me.
Sister?
She's told everything
No,
now.
I haven't either.
She didn't give us your full name.
Well, I'm Gloria Welch Williams, and I was born and raised at the end of Dusty Lane. Everybody's calling it. We didn't call it that then. My dad homesteaded property over there. He was the first one. And then grandparents moved there, and then eventually the rest of the clan all moved down the lane. Some of them didn't stay, some of them moved on. And I remember things a little different about the school than Jim does, and he's older than I am, so I really shouldn't say that. But we only went to the 8th grade at Arrey school, and we never went anywhere else from the time. And I was born in 33, so. But there was a school at Derry, and there was one at Arrey, and most of us went to Arrey.
Tell us about your dad working on the dam.
Well, things was during the Depression. Things were really bad, and so when he got a chance to go to work on the Cabaya Dam when they built it, it was built by Victory Construction, and he drove an old truck that had no top on it, did have a windshield, no brakes. So it's a wonder that people, and there was several people killed when that dam was built. People survived it. I remember when the McGuires here moved to the valley from Oklahoma, and the twins were really little, and I remember they were so cute. Their little bib overalls driving on. And their mother was a great seamstress and cook. And
Where'd you go if you got sick? Let's say you really got sick. Where did your parents take you?
nowhere. They doctored you at home. I've had mustard poultices and Vicks Salve, and everybody did. You know, you just took what you had. And
Did you go in or have anyone in the community that knew the native plants that would go out? If you're talking about mustard plasters or anything where they
No.
could go out and pick plants to...
there was Dr. Steele in Hatch, and he's the one that delivered me back
There-
home.
There was also Dr. Bitter in Hatch.
Yeah, but
and
that
these
was
two,
many years later. Probably 20
Many
years
years
later,
later,
yeah.
he delivered belongs, didn't he? It's 47.
But like Emma was saying, I knew the Bencomas well. They lived right across from the school there, and he was a night teacher. And I went to school with Emma from 1st through 8th grade. So, but
Gloria,
Mr.
I remember
Bencoma,
your mother and your maternal grandmother always wore a hat to church.
oh yeah, women used to wear hats to church.
They never went without a hat.
Gloria didn't tell you, I don't remember it because I was younger and stuff, but Daddy used to milk. Tell him about Daddy milking
Well, we
before he
had
went to the work at the Cabaya.
I started to tell that, and then I got off on this other story. But he had a dairy, kind of. We milked several cows, and it was down here by the river bridge in the Mosley place. And we would bring the cows in. Dad got a job on the dam, and that was a lifesaver for all of us. And Mom and I'd go over and round up the cows and get them in the stalls and get them hosed down and everything. Dad would milk of a morning, set the milk out on the highway, the milk cans, and Price's Dairy would pick it up. And then from there, like I said, he did pretty good with working at the dam, and things got better with the farm, and we bought another place, and eventually my father did really well.
Did he farm then later? I mean, after...
Oh, he farmed all during that time too.
And what was it? What were the plants that what was the...
We had cotton, alfalfa. That was the main thing. Planted some corn.
Have you noticed how the plant production in the valley has changed? It's
Oh, yeah.
shifted?
Oh, yeah.
and talk about that.
Well, the cotton is different too. It's been, the university has, I don't know how to say it.
Genetically altered?
Yes, and the cotton used to get really tall, and you go and they'd top the cotton. If you didn't, you couldn't hardly get through there. It looked like trees, and it made more cotton by topping it. And I want to go back to one story that they were talking about Geraldine. When they were talking about the quail that Price Black raised, Mr. George was the first one, her father, that raised the quail. They lived over on the place where Dale and Edna lived eventually, but at the time, the Georges lived over on that corner, and I went to school with her brother George. And that's all your dad did was raise the
He started
quail and pheasant,
Price
whatever,
Black.
for Price Black.
Wow. Excellent.
Gloria was talking about the McGuires. I remember their mother used to deliver, in later years, she used to deliver milk to TRC to different customers and stuff. And they never could play till we washed all those milk bottles and everything. So we washed many a milk bottle together. Remember that?
Did you know when Carrie Tingley, when they were having Price Dairy decided maybe they wouldn't bring milk down to Tier C, the Governor Tingley got on the phone and the company wrote a letter and said, Carrie Tingley will continue to get Price Black milk.
Even
Price
when there
Dairy.
was a
Yeah,
shortage.
even when there was a shortage.
And not everybody else would get it. Price's Black did deliver to Carrie Tingley Hospital
Yeah.
in the 30s, right after during the Depression. So that was very honorable of Price's Black.
What I was going to tell you about the Bencomas too, when I went to school with Emma, her father didn't believe in the girls going past the 8th grade. They could not go to high school, but the boys got to go. And I'm sure he'll tell about that too. But Emma went on and did great things with her life even after that. And Mrs. Grahava, like I said, she used to think I'd think she was teacher's pet, but she didn't speak English, as most of the kids in our class didn't. So Mrs. Grahava spent a lot of time with the kids, and she did a great job. And she was a wonderful teacher, really.
Was she your first grade teacher?
Yes.
And who was your second grade teacher?
Her.
Oh, so you had the same one, so you just,
First and
and
second.
the third grade was,
I have no idea.
Well, when did Mrs. Dawson start?
She taught third and fourth grade.
was that Alice Dawson?
Yes.
Okay.
Mrs. Dawson taught third and fourth grade. Mrs. Grahava taught first and second.
Mrs. Kendall.
Miss Campbell.
Mrs. Campbell had the fifth and sixth, and Mr. Sides had seventh and eighth when I
Okay,
went to
Mr. Bond
school.
was my 7th and 8th grade teacher.
Now leave my sixth.
I think Alice Dawson ended up being a superintendent of the school district.
Yes, she did.
No.
No,
If she did, I don't know.
no, oh, they were
I
wrong.
thought Alice Dawson.
Bleep that out, Jay.
I thought that, because was she the one that wrote the letter that she wanted all the teachers to do some real good teaching
You know, I
with arithmetic?
don't
I mean,
remember. We'll have to check that out.
With New Mexico.
We'll find out and tell Jackie.
Yeah, we'll let you know, because we have a letter that she had written some educators about teaching New Mexico history.
Yeah, and she said, let's have a real good year teaching this year.
Of New Mexico history. Does anybody remember with their family talking about when we went into statehood? Was there any discussions about early
No.
on? Because probably most families moved in here after we became a state in 1912, or was that the time that families were moving into the area?
That was before our time.
Okay.
Yeah. All
What
right.
I remember about Mrs. Dawson too, she didn't have the heart to fail somebody. So one of the requirements from going to the third to the fourth grade is you had to learn the multiplication tables. So we had 3 kids, and I'm not going to say who. It wasn't me though. They went from third to high third, and the rest of us went to fourth.
That's the kind of teacher I was. Sir, introduce yourself.
My name is Robert McGuire. I've lived here since 1946. We'd moved from Epcot, Oklahoma when I was about 2.5 years old.
Were you the one in the cute coveralls?
Yes, him
Yeah,
and
that's
his
the one.
brother.
And most of these people can tell better stories on me than I can tell on myself. But we'd lived here and farmed a little block of land there. We used to live in a house down below that they've torn down. And the kids, all us kids liked that house better. And then my folks bought this place next door. And so we had to move up there, but we liked the old house better. And they've since tore that down. But we went to grade school with Anita and a whole bunch of them here, and up to the 8th grade, and then we went to high school and graduated in '61. And I worked for Price Black Dairies for a couple of years, and then my brother worked for Lloyd Welch, Anita's dad, for a couple of years. And then we used to go, we'd be farming across from each other because we was twins. We used to go trade tractors, trade positions. He'd be working for Price Black and I'd be working for Lloyd, but none of them knew it. But we had a lot of fun in high school and growing up as being twins, that where we're identical enough. Sometimes my mother, if we was walking away from her, she couldn't quite tell which boy was which boy. But it's amazing, we still look quite a bit alike in our later life. And I went to college a little while, and I went to work for the railroad and worked 16 years for them, but I always called this home. And then later in life, I got a chance to buy my dad's farm and moved my family here and have been here ever since. We used to, there was about 8 of us kids there that was about the same age that went to grade school together, and we didn't have anywhere to go and anything to do, so we'd get together sometimes on the weekends and dance and play music and dance in somebody's home somewhere. And we went from grade school all the way to high school, all 8 of us.
Wow.
So that was when we get to see most of the people they're still around.
I might add, when I got married, his sister Eileen was my bridesmaid, and her husband Clinton Wilkinson was my husband's best friend, and he was best man, and later they married and they live in Socorro. What I remember about the twins and stuff too is we didn't have a lot of activity, but we always had fun. We'd go, I wouldn't want to do it now, but we used to go swimming in the canal all the time, and I remember what a great time we had when they figured out how we could ski in the canal from this bridge right up here to Price Black Farm. And they put a boom on the pickup. Wonder how we had to kill herself. But anyway, we skied in the canal from
She
that
does
bridge.
not want her grandchildren falling in her footsteps.
No, oh, they wouldn't get in it with a 10-foot pole.
We always say that we invented surfing. And we took the door off the outhouse and made a board and skied up the canal. But, it used to be a pretty popular thing that a lot of people did it because it was about 1.5 miles, so you could ski up there and then ski back, and we never got in really trouble. They frown on it. Another little story I'd like to say is that Jackie's dad had a pond over here, a little swimming hole, and so we'd go over there and swim in it. And one time Jackie stole her clothes. We'd went skinny dipping and we couldn't get out, and she wouldn't give them back to us for quite a while.
Wait a minute, I don't remember doing that.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is Jackney Faulkner, in case you need any clarification of who stole the clothes.
But being a twin, we had a lot of fun growing up, and we did a lot of honorary things together, but we always had fun. And,
Absolutely.
I remember that we used to swim. They had dirt tanks that my dad used to pump in for several hours and stuff, and then he'd open up, excuse me, and it was like give him a good head of water, and we swam in those tanks all the time. And my mother didn't swim, and she always would go with us, and she'd stand up on the bank and holler, "You girls don't get in over your head and stuff, you'll drown." Well, Mother didn't swim. She didn't take a pole or anything. I guess she went along to watch us drown. I can think of. After I got grown, I thought, why did Mother sit up there on that bank? There wasn't a darn thing she could have done, remember?
Okay, we'll go to the next row here, if you'll introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Ollie Cooper, and I hit Arrey at midnight, September 17th, 1946. And we come out here for my dad to work for my uncle. He had a farm down on the river just east of Arrey over there. And we was here for till Christmas of 47, and then we moved to Cruces. And Otis Barnes rented some farms down there, and he got Daddy to go down there and work for him. So we was down there for that year. And then Daddy bought a farm in Arkansas. So we went to Arkansas for 4 years. Then we come back to Texas, mule shoe, because this uncle that was here had moved from here and went to Texas and bought another farm. So we went back down there to work for him again. And in '52, we come back out here to Arrey. Daddy there was a guy had a rabbit farm right below Cavallo Dam over there. And he was doing all right with that until the bottom fell out of him. And he couldn't make enough money off of them to buy gas to take them to Cruces where he had to market them. So we took over 800 rabbits out there just below Cavallo Dam and turned them loose.
Now we know who to blame for the rabbit overpopulation.
Well, I imagine the cows got the biggest part of this.
What type of a rabbit was it? I mean, were they white or were they just a
They
regular?
were white.
They were white, so they would really been an easy mark for owls.
Oh,
and-
yeah, for the cows and anything they wanted. Fact is, you guys around here went out and caught some of them and took them home.
800.
And I did go to school, when we come here, I went to school at Arrey in second and third grade, and Miss Grahava was my teacher in the second, and Miss Dawson in the third. She put me up into the fourth, and when we moved to Cruces, I got put back to the third. But anyway, the folks left and went to California in '55, and I stayed here with my sister and brother-in-law, Louise and Joe McNutt. I don't know whether anybody remembers them or not, but they had a farm up there right next to where we had the rabbit farm. And I worked for them on the farm for, till sometime in '56. And then I got a job with the State Highway Department. And we moved all around here in this district. And in '61, I got married. And I kind of drifted away from here. And then, I don't know, there's a lot of,
Why are you living here now?
I live with Debbie.
Oh, another foreigner, huh?
Well, we left, when I quit the highway department in '68, we went to Colorado to work for my wife's mother and dad, who owned a big motel and restaurant outfit up there. And I worked for them for, nearly 7 years. And I went to work for him because the kids was getting big enough to go to school. And with the highway department, 1 year, we moved 11 times on the job I was on, and I moved my trailer house 10.
Wow.
So I went to work for them, thought we was gonna be in one place. Well, that didn't pan out. He sold that place in 1970, and we all went to California. And and then come back to well, I come back to New Mexico in, I guess it was still in 70 sometime. And he had bought 6 motels in 4 states. And I took over the one in Farmington. That was the best motel he had. He bought them because they were from Travelodge because they were getting old and run down and they were taking them out of the chain. Well, he bought them and we would go in. That one I had was one of the best ones that didn't need that much work on it, and he sold that and got some money to operate on the others. But I would go in, new TVs, new carpet, go through all the air conditioners and heaters, refurbish them, get them up, and then he would sell them, and I'd go to the next one. I could never catch up, because every time he'd sell one, he'd buy another one. But anyway, I quit him in 74, I guess. I come back to Las Cruces. Well, I come back to Hatch. Joe and Louise McNutt was living in Hatch, and I come back to stayed with them for a while. Because my wife was still running Amarillo, Texas. And when she come down, we went to Cruces and stayed down there for a while. I went to work for contractors. I put in 18 years with Burn Construction down there. And then he sold out everything, so I went to work for River Construction out of Albuquerque. And then I decided I was getting too old to do that kind of work, so I bought an RV park in Dibby.
So you just like to come and visit Arrey?
Well, I still know several people around
There you
here.
go. So it's like family.
Me and Boyd's still in touch. My sister married one of Boyd's uncle, that TK that they've all been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up with most of them around here.
That's excellent. Thank you for sharing. All right, we got 2 more on the row here. All right, if you'd like to introduce yourselves.
Okay, I'm Ronald McGuire. I'm the other half of the twins.
Are you the better looking half everybody was talking about? That's what I thought. Okay.
I'm the younger one.
The younger one.
I'm the younger one.
Okay.
And we was raised right here in this little house to the east of this property. And we had a good life, but we worked from sun up to sundown. And my folks had milk cows, and we had a big garden. We had cotton, alfalfa. Then later on, my dad started baling hay for other people, and he baled hay for Price Black Farm for 27 years. And as part of that, my mother was worked in the fields and drove tractors. She could drive truck. She could do just about anything, or learn how to do it. In later years, they they started fishing, and he would never let her drive the boat. He was legally blind. He couldn't see worth a darn, but he wouldn't let her drive the boat. Now why, I don't know, because I guess the captain of the boat is always the captain. But I was the quieter one of the twins. And I think I first learned to talk when I was about 7, 8 years old, because I didn't have to talk, Robert talked for me. And it was... Anyway,
It's true.
I always hated, we chopped cotton all day, and then late in the evening, we would work in the garden, and I always hated that. But later in years, I kind of liked that, and it was good training for life that we knew how to work, and that's how I got my first job on the railroad. That they hired me over several other older people because they kind of liked them farm boys. They knew how to work, and I started on the railroad building bridges, and there wasn't any power tools. Everything was done by hand for the most part. And then later on, we always liked to run equipment, and Robert and I did construction work with heavy equipment for several years. And then he quit and went back to the farm, and I got in as an engineer, and I was an engineer for the railroad for 21 years. And
Were you able to still live in Arrey and be the engineer?
I had a little place at Rincon for a long time, but then we moved to Carlsbad to be closer to my job. I always thought, well, when I moved to Carlsbad, I would be able to stay there. Well, over half of my career was away from home. And in the last years that I worked, I run the main line between Clovis and Blinn. And one of the better moments of my career was that through luck of the draw, I got to drag the Olympic torch train between Clovis and Blinn. And anyway, it was a 17-car passenger train and had the Olympic torch on it. And we were supposed to run 55 mile an hour originally, but we were running short on time, so we run 70. And it was amazing that we passed the other trains running 70 the other direction, and that torch didn't go out.
Wow.
But
And what year was that?
oh,
The torch.
it was the year they had the Olympics in Salt Lake City,
That was
2002 or something like that, 2000, somewhere along in there.
Yeah, okay.
And
How do you think Array's changed for the better, and how do you think you'd like to go back?
well, I don't know any of the people anymore, Arrey. We are the older generation now. And I can remember when I was a little kid, I can always remember my folks talk about Clemens and people. And I worked for Lloyd Welch for a couple years after I got out of high school, and it was good. I don't know where I was a very good hand or not, but anyway, I had a good time. And so one year, one of the stories I can tell you is that my mother was a pretty good tractor driver, and she was out there listing rows, and she wasn't getting them very straight. And my dad was kind of picky on these tractor drivers, and he didn't tell you in any kindly words. So he chewed on her. Said, "You're not getting them roads straight." She told him, "Well, Gene, you know, I'm the only woman driving a tractor between El Paso and TRC on Christmas Eve, and I think I'll make them just like I want them."
Good
He
for
didn't
her.
say anything more. He just let her make them roads a little crooked if she wanted them crooked.
Good for her. And the lady next to him?
I'm Mary Bouvard, I'm his wife, and I'm not from Arrey, I'm sort of a transplant. But since we've been married, I've got to meet lots of Arrey people.
Yeah.
And spend a lot of time with his family.
So it's home.
Yeah.
It's home.
I can remember, and it wasn't that unusual to me, but it was probably unusual for the time. When we married, his mom worked at Tinley.
Oh, wow.
And of course, she did all the housework and cleaning and laundry and stuff on the weekends. And she would do laundry in her old Ringer washing machine. This was in '65, in the backyard. And the water here is awful. As most people know, it's really bad. And she would crack the water with lye so before she could do laundry. And I remember my grandma doing that, but you know, that was something unusual that she was doing.
That
still
late.
having to do.
Yeah.
She was a great person.
One of the things that I'd mention is when we was little kids, we hoed cotton, and the cotton was, like I say, different back then. It made trees. They couldn't see us out there hoeing cotton because they could only see the top of the hoe handle because we wasn't. That's how young we was. But we had a little store over here, and my dad would have a Pepsi break. Well, some farmer would stop at the store, and then my dad'd come, and we'd come, and then Lloyd Welch and Gene Welch or Dale Tibbs, all the local farmers would come along. Well, they had to stop and have a Pepsi. And I wouldn't say that they lied, but one of them would tell some kind of story that was a little
on the large side, and then the other farmer, and Dale Tibbs was one of them, he would have to question that. And this story would just get bigger and more elaborate as it went. But anyway, that was quite entertaining to us boys, that when we went back to the field, we had some stories to think about, you know.
Something to live up to.
When-
I think, oh, go ahead.
When they moved here, he tells it all the time. They were 2.5 years old. And he remembers coming to Arrey in a big truck and unloading, you know, the furniture. The people that were living in the house that they were supposed to move into were still there. They were, she was finished, I guess, moving all of her stuff out, and she was sweeping off the porch. But at 2.5 years old, he remembers.
I
It was
remember
quite
that
moving.
distinctly, her standing on them steps sweeping off that porch.
Were
And
they
I
being
don't remember-
evicted?
No,
No.
they were just moving
They
out.
were just late getting moved out, and we moved here in an old cattle truck, and she said a large truck, but it was 35 feet long, which is not much of a truck now. But anyway, we came in an old Model A, and it had been hand painted blue, and we called it Blue John. And one time my dad let Robert drive down the bar pit coming up the house. Well, he did all right going down the bar pit, but when he turned into the house, we had an old adobe building there that we called the smokehouse. And when he pulled in there, well, he couldn't work the brakes, so he ran into the side of the house. So he
Oh,
didn't get
no.
to ride for a while.
Is there anybody else that would like to share? Oh, and then we'll let you eat. We'll get out of here. All right.
Yes.
Go ahead.
When we was building this church house, they had electricity up to here, you know. And from here north, there was no electricity. And the rules was you had to have 3 electrical units before you could get electricity. So Daddy, he got electricity